The Watchers of Highway 285. Riley Cortez found the teeth first, not in some dark alley or abandoned building where you'd expect to find human remains, but tucked inside the glove compartment of a rusted Peterbilt at a truck stop outside Pecos, Texas. 7 molars, wrapped in a page, torn from a notebook. The same kind of notebook he'd found behind his passenger seat 3 weeks ago. The same careful handwriting. The same meticulous notes about dates and times and coordinates. But this page was different. This page had a name crossed out in thick black ink. Marcus Holloway. Completed. Before we begin, I want to thank every soul that keeps returning to listen. You've turned whispers into echoes. If you haven't already, subscribe and stay close, because what you're about to hear is one story you won't forget. Riley's hands trembled as he read the entry below the crossed-out name. His own name. Riley Cortez. Brown Kenworth, Bode 900. Drives alone. No family. Perfect. Perfect for what? That question had been eating at Riley for 22 days now, ever since that first night at the truck plaza off Highway 285. 22 days since he'd noticed the man in the faded denim jacket watching him from across the parking lot. 22 days since his life on the road had turned into something he couldn't explain and couldn't escape. The West Texas highways had always been Riley's sanctuary. 43 years old, divorced, no kids, just him and the open road and the steady rhythm of miles clicking past. He'd been hauling freight across the Southwest for nearly 2 decades. Oil field equipment mostly, sometimes construction materials. Always alone. That's how he liked it. No dispatcher breathing down his neck, no partner complaining about his music choices, just the highway and the hum of the engine and the endless Texas sky. But sanctuary had become prison, and every truck stop now felt like a hunting ground. It started simple enough. Riley had pulled into the Cactus Flats Travel Plaza around 11 p.m., bone-tired after 14 hours on the road from Midland to El Paso. The plaza was one of those forgotten places that barely registered on GPS. Half the overhead lights were out. The convenience store looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 80s, and the only other vehicles in the lot were a couple of semi-trucks parked in the shadows and a pickup with Oklahoma plates. Riley went through his usual routine. Fuel first, then a bathroom break, then inside for coffee that tasted like motor oil, and maybe a microwave burrito if he was feeling ambitious. The clerk behind the counter was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging him when he paid. That's when Riley first noticed the man. He was standing near the magazine rack, wearing a denim jacket, so faded it looked almost gray. Average height, average build. Nothing remarkable about him except for one thing. He never moved. Not to browse the magazines, not to adjust his stance. Nothing. He just stood there, facing Riley's direction, hands in his pockets. Riley grabbed his coffee and headed back outside. The fluorescent lights of the plaza cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. His Kenworth sat at pump 7, the chrome accents catching the light. He climbed into the cab, settled into the driver's seat, and that's when he saw the man again, standing by the ice machine. Same position, same empty expression, still watching. Riley told himself it was nothing. Truck stops attracted strange people. Lot lizards, meth heads, drifters with nowhere else to go. He'd seen it all. He started the engine, pulled out of the plaza, and got back on Highway 285 heading south. By sunrise, he'd convinced himself it was just road fatigue playing tricks on him. By the next week, he knew better. The second encounter happened at a different truck stop, nearly 200 miles away. Riley had just finished securing his load, a shipment of drilling equipment bound for Midland, when he walked into the convenience store and saw another man in a faded denim jacket. Different face, same vacant stare, same unsettling stillness. This one was younger, maybe 30s, with a notebook in his hands. Riley watched as the man slowly, deliberately, wrote something in the notebook while looking directly at Riley's truck through the window. Then the man closed the notebook, tucked it under his arm, and walked out of the store. He didn't buy anything, didn't speak to anyone, just walked out and disappeared into the parking lot. Riley's stomach turned. He went outside, searching for the man, but the guy had vanished. The parking lot was empty, except for the usual scatter of trucks and a couple of cars. No sign of the denim jacket anywhere. That night, while checking his cab before heading out, Riley found the notebook. It was wedged behind the passenger seat, barely visible, like someone had slipped it through the window or the door while he wasn't looking. The cover was worn leather, the pages yellowed and dog-eared. Riley's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were lists, dates, times, locations, highway exit numbers, truck stop names, and descriptions, detailed clinical descriptions of truckers. White Freightliner, driver approximately 50s, beard, drives with window open, stopped for 27 minutes, ate inside, spoke to no one. Blue Mac, female driver, red hair, late 30s, refueled at pump 3, made phone call, departed heading west. Black Volvo, driver 40s, wedding ring, stopped twice in 24 hours, sleeps in cab, no visible contacts, page after page of observations. Riley flipped through, his breath coming faster, until he found the entry about himself. Brown Kenworth, Hugh 900, driver male, early 40s, drives alone, no wedding ring, no CB radio chatter, stops every 6 to 8 hours. Prefers isolated locations. Route: Midland to El Paso, consistent pattern. Subject: exhibits signs of solitary lifestyle. Ideal candidate. The words "ideal candidate" were underlined 3 times. Riley dropped the notebook like it had burned him. His first instinct was to call the cops, but what would he even say? Someone was watching truckers and taking notes. That wasn't illegal. Creepy as hell, but not illegal. And what evidence did he have? A notebook that could have come from anywhere, written by anyone. He told himself to forget it, throw the notebook away and move on. But he couldn't. Because 3 days later, at another truck stop, it happened again. This time the man in the denim jacket was standing beside Riley's cab when he came out of the restroom, just standing there in the dark, close enough to touch the door handle, holding another notebook. The man didn't run when Riley shouted, didn't react at all. He just stared at Riley with eyes that seemed too dark, too hollow, then turned and walked away with slow, deliberate steps. Riley jumped in his cab and locked the doors, heart hammering. He sat there in the dark, watching the mirrors, waiting for the man to come back. When he finally worked up the nerve to get out and look around, the parking lot was empty again. That's when Riley started asking questions. He began stopping at different truck stops, breaking his usual route patterns, talking to other drivers. Most of them brushed him off. Lone trucker paranoia, they said. Too many hours on the road scrambling his brain. But a few drivers had noticed things, too. strange people in denim jackets, notebooks, being watched. One driver, an older guy named Gene, who'd been hauling for 30 years, pulled Riley aside at a rest stop outside Odessa. "You seen the jacket men?" Gene asked, his voice low. "The ones who watch?" Riley nodded. Gene's face went pale. "Then you better pray they lose interest, because the ones they keep watching, they don't stay on the road long." "What do you mean?" "Drivers go missing, kid. Not all at once, not in a way that makes the news, but it happens. Independent contractors like us, no family, no connections. We disappear, and nobody looks too hard. I knew 3 guys over the last 5 years who talked about being followed, being watched. All 3 of them gone. Trucks found abandoned, cargo intact, no sign of struggle, just gone." Riley felt ice in his veins. "Did you report it? To who? Highway Patrol? FBI? With what evidence?" Gene shook his head. "You can't prove something that leaves no trace. All I know is the jacket men show up and truckers disappear." That conversation was 4 days ago. Since then, Riley had seen the watchers everywhere. Different faces, same jackets, same notebooks, same dead-eyed stares. They appeared at every stop, always in the periphery, always watching, always writing. And now, Riley stood in an abandoned truck stop parking lot at 3 a.m, holding a bag of human teeth and reading his own death sentence in a stranger's handwriting. Riley Cortez, Brown Kenworth W, Hughes 900, drives alone, no family. Perfect. He had to know, had to understand what he was dealing with. So, Riley had done what every horror movie character does when they know better. He'd started investigating. The Peterbilt he'd found the teeth in belonged to Marcus Holloway, according to the registration in the glove compartment. Riley had found the truck abandoned behind a shuttered gas station covered in dust, clearly sitting there for weeks. The doors were unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. And in the glove compartment, wrapped in notebook paper, were the teeth. Riley searched the cab with shaking hands. He found more notebooks. Dozens of them, stacked under the passenger seat, filled with the same meticulous observations. Different handwriting on each one, but the same format, the same clinical detail. And at the bottom of the stack, Riley found something that made his blood turn to ice. A photograph, not of Marcus Holloway, not of any trucker, but of a thing that barely looked human anymore. Pale flesh stretched too tight over elongated limbs. Joints that bent wrong. A face that had too many features. Eyes where eyes shouldn't be. A mouth that split vertically instead of horizontally. And in its hands, it held a notebook, written on the back of the photo in shaky handwriting. This is what they become. The watchers aren't human. They're growing. They're multiplying. If you're reading this, run. Don't stop. Don't. The message ended mid-sentence. Riley's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We see you, Riley. We're coming closer." He looked up from the phone. In the darkness beyond the Peterbilt, figures were emerging from the shadows. 5 of them. 10. More. All wearing faded denim jackets. All carrying notebooks. All walking toward him with that same slow, deliberate pace. Riley ran. He sprinted across the parking lot toward his Kenworth, fumbling with his keys. Behind him, he heard nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just an awful silence that somehow felt worse than any sound. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The figures had spread out, forming a circle around the lot. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They just walked, patient and inevitable, closing the distance. Riley reached his truck and hauled himself into the cab, slamming the door and hitting the locks. His hands shook so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. He threw the truck into gear and punched the accelerator. The Kenworth lurched forward. One of the jacket men was directly in his path, still walking, still writing in that goddamn notebook. Riley didn't slow down. He couldn't. The truck's bumper caught the figure, and there was a sound like tearing fabric, wet and wrong, and accompanied by a smell that made Riley gag. But the figure didn't fall. It latched onto the front of the truck, fingers digging into the metal with impossible strength. Riley watched in horror as the thing that had been pretending to be human began to change. The denim jacket tore as the body underneath expanded. Flesh rippled and split, revealing something pale and segmented beneath. The face stretched wide, the mouth opening vertically to show rows of teeth that looked disturbingly familiar. Human molars arranged in spirals, arms elongated, growing additional joints, fingers splitting into tendrils that scratched against the windshield. Riley screamed and swerved hard. The thing held on. He swerved again, harder, and finally the creature tumbled off, rolling across the asphalt in a tangle of wrong-angled limbs. In his mirrors, Riley saw the other figures stop walking. They stood perfectly still, watching him go. And then, in perfect unison, they all opened their notebooks and began to write. Riley drove for 6 hours straight, not stopping, barely breathing, until the sun came up and Highway 285 became crowded with morning traffic. Normal people in normal cars heading to normal jobs. The sight of it almost made him cry with relief. He pulled into a truck stop outside Fort Stockton, one with bright lights and security cameras and at least 20 other trucks in the lot. Safety in numbers, witnesses, proof that he was still in the real world and not trapped in some nightmare. Riley sat in his cab, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what he'd seen, trying to convince himself it hadn't been real, that exhaustion and stress had created hallucinations. But the dent in his bumper was real. The scratches on his windshield were real. And when he checked his phone, he found 17 new text messages from unknown numbers. "We're patient, Riley. You can't drive forever. Sleep eventually comes. We'll be there when it does." Riley deleted the messages, but they kept coming. He turned off his phone, but when he turned it back on, there were more. Always more. Always watching, always writing. For 3 days, Riley barely slept. He stayed at truck stops with maximum traffic, parked under lights, kept his doors locked. He stopped accepting solo hauls and started deadheading between cities, burning through his savings just to keep moving. He called Gene, the older driver who'd warned him, but the number was disconnected. He tried to report what he'd seen to the police, but what could he say? Monsters disguised as people were stalking truckers? They'd think he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. On the 4th day, exhaustion finally caught up with him. Riley pulled into a rest area outside of Balmorhea, telling himself he'd just close his eyes for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes to reset, to think clearly, to figure out what to do next. He woke up to knocking on his window. The sun had set. The rest area was empty except for his truck and one other vehicle, a van with darkened windows, and standing outside his driver's side door, illuminated by the interior light, was a man in a faded denim jacket. holding a notebook, smiling with too many teeth. Riley's scream died in his throat. He reached for the ignition, but his keys were gone. He looked around frantically and saw them sitting on the dashboard, 10 feet away, impossibly out of reach, though he'd been holding them when he fell asleep. The knocking continued, patient, rhythmic. The man outside gestured to the door handle, pantomiming the motion of unlocking it. Riley shook his head, terror rendering him mute. The man's smile widened. Then his jaw unhinged, and the face began to split vertically, peeling back to reveal the spiraling teeth and the pale, writhing flesh beneath. The denim jacket tore as the body expanded, growing larger, pressing against the window. The glass cracked. Riley scrambled for the passenger door, but when he looked out that window, he saw more of them. 5 figures in denim jackets surrounding the truck, all beginning to shed their human disguises, all revealing what they truly were. Things that fed on the isolated, the forgotten, the alone. Things that had been selecting him, studying him, waiting for the perfect moment. The driver's side window shattered. A tendril of pale flesh snaked through the opening, reaching for Riley's face. He pressed himself against the passenger door, fumbling with the lock, and then light flooded the rest area. Headlights, big, bright, commercial headlights, from a convoy of trucks pulling off the highway. At least 8 rigs, all traveling together, their CB radios crackling with chatter. People, witnesses, life. The creature recoiled from the light. Through the shattered window, Riley saw all of the jacket men retreat, shrinking back into their human shapes, denim reforming over alien flesh. Within seconds, they looked normal again, just random people scattered around the rest area. But their notebooks were still open, still recording, still patient. Riley didn't wait. He dove through the passenger door, hitting the ground hard, and ran toward the convoy of trucks. The drivers were climbing out, stretching their legs, a whole group traveling together for safety, though they probably didn't know why they needed it. "Help!" Riley shouted. "Please, I need—" A hand gripped his shoulder. Riley spun around and found himself face to face with one of the convoy drivers. An older woman, with kind eyes and gray hair. She was wearing a faded denim jacket. She held out a notebook. "You're coming with us, Riley," she said, her voice perfectly calm and perfectly wrong. "You've been selected. The observation period is complete. It's time for your transformation." Riley looked around wildly. All of the truck drivers from the convoy were pulling notebooks from their cabs. All of them were smiling with mouths that had too many teeth. All of them were writing his name. He ran, back toward his Kenworth, back toward the highway, back toward anywhere that wasn't here. Behind him, he heard them following, not running, never running, just walking with that patient, inevitable pace. Riley made it to the highway, flagging down a passing car. A young couple, tourists by the look of them, pulled over. "Please," Riley gasped. "I need a ride. I need to get away from—" The driver rolled down his window. He was wearing a faded denim jacket. In the passenger seat, his girlfriend held a notebook. "Hello, Riley," they said in unison. "We've been expecting you." Riley stumbled backward, his mind fracturing. They were everywhere, had always been everywhere. How many people on these highways were human anymore? How many had been replaced, transformed, absorbed into whatever these things were? His phone buzzed. Text message. "There's nowhere to run. We own the roads now." Riley turned and ran into the darkness beyond the rest area, into the scrubland and the desert, leaving behind the highways that had once been his sanctuary. Behind him, dozens of figures in denim jackets emerged from vehicles and shadows, all walking in the same direction, all following him, all writing in their notebooks, all smiling. And in the distance, Riley heard the sound of more engines, more trucks, more vehicles pulling off Highway 285 to join the hunt. Headlights swept across the desert like searchlights, creating a net of light and shadow that was slowly, methodically closing in. Riley ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He collapsed behind an outcropping of rock, gasping for air, trying to think, trying to find some way out of this nightmare. His phone buzzed again. Against his better judgment, he looked at it. The message was a photo, taken from behind, showing Riley crouched behind the rocks, showing exactly where he was hiding. The caption read, "We see you. We're always watching, and soon you'll be watching too." Riley looked up. In the moonlight, he could see them coming, hundreds of them now, emerging from every truck and car on Highway 285, spreading across the desert like a tide, all wearing denim jackets, all carrying notebooks, all walking with that same patient, inevitable pace. There was nowhere left to run. Riley Cortez closed his eyes and waited for the transformation to begin. Above him, the West Texas stars glittered cold and distant, illuminating highways that had become feeding grounds for things that wore human faces and wrote human words but had stopped being human a long time ago. And somewhere in the darkness, a notebook page turned and careful handwriting recorded the final entry. Riley Cortez completed. The highways hummed with traffic, and the watchers smiled and found their next lonely soul to observe.